session this evening, Impact Investing Going Mainstream, a dialogue brought to you by Mr. A.J. Karunakaran, President at TI Silicon Valley, and Mr. Dhanpal Jhaveri, Vice Chairman, Everstone Group. Gentlemen, the stage is all yours.
Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to the TI Sustainability Summit. My name is AGK, I go by initials AGK Karunakaran. I'm the President of TI Silicon Valley. I'm also a managing partner at an impact investing partnership called 3i Partners. And also I'm the CEO of Multicodeware. It's a great opportunity. It's the first time TI is doing something about sustainability and impact investment. It's going to be a great conversation with Dhanpal. Go ahead.
Thank you, AGK. A very good morning to all of you and good day to people from around the world. I'm Dhanpal Jhaveri. I'm a partner at Everstone Capital. We are a private capital business investing in India and in the region for the last 14 years. We manage about $6 billion, and over the last 6 years, ESG and impact has become very core to our investing strategy. At TI, I have been involved since the last 10 years. I was the past president of TI Mumbai and have been quite involved with many of the SIGs in TI. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing what you talk about TI, right? So, as Silicon Valley, we started TI back in 1992. It's going to be 30 years. But very, very early on, we had a concept of social entrepreneurship. So at TICon, I remember back in 2000s, I don't know which year, I know one of the co-chairs of the big TICon conference we had. And at that time, when we talked about social entrepreneurship, people kind of bucketed as, hey, that's NGOs and all that stuff. Today, if you really take a look at it, this has come a long way from NGO all the way to for-profit companies at large scales, considering the kind of investments that you're making. The journey has been phenomenal, right? And TI Silicon Valley has done a lot towards that, in terms of enabling entrepreneurs to do sustainable technologies. We've had lots of, multiple tracks over the years related to IoT, alternate energies. So we've looked at, broadly, when microfinance was big, I guess 15 years ago, a lot of engagement from in the Valley investors. They came in and invested in India also. So there's a lot of things that TI ecosystem has done for this particular segment. And over the years, impact meant a lot. Maybe you can talk about what is impact today.
Interesting, AGK, because impact is a word which, if you really think at the core of it, is trying to make something positive in society. Over the last decade, what's happened is that the world has started taking notice of many issues which are facing society, whether it is livelihood, whether it is healthcare, whether it is upliftment of people, whether it is the climate, right, which is today. In fact, I read somewhere that it's today considered the #1 risk in the world ahead of the pandemic. And so there are lots of areas where the world is kind of facing challenges. And in many ways, the UN and other countries, and I would say at every level, at the citizen, at the corporate, and at the country level, at every level, people are saying now we need to be thinking about what we do and how it actually creates positivity in everything that we do. So my personal view is that the whole role of businesses today has shifted from businesses which at one point in time was, the mantra of businesses was to maximize profits, to where today you're saying that you need to be making profits, but with a purpose. And I think what would be good for both of us is to explore what this means from the TI community's perspective as entrepreneurs, as professionals, and as, I would say, responsible citizens.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you talked about, companies with purpose, right? So I'm not sure how it's more popular in India these days, but certainly there is a class of corporations that got developed called B corporations. You may be familiar with them, but like big brands in India, in US, like Patagonia, Ben and Jerry, and many of them merge in. I think all of them are into this B corporation where they even have some sort of like how you do, checklists in terms of how to be a B corporation. So there is external auditing organizations to make sure that your purpose is never compromised, right? So a lot of companies right from the beginning. I mean, I'm talking about the founding days all the way to the board and the shareholders. Everybody are aligned to that. So the purpose first, shareholders next. So that's kind of stuff. But coming back to impact investment, you talked about UN. They have defined the Sustainable Development Goals, 15 different aspects of various aspects of human
17.
life. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
17. I know it used to be 15. They keep adding maybe. But, for everything, for company to company, person to person, it's different. Certain things resonates with certain people, and certain things require significant infrastructure. Certain things can be done with very little. Applying technology can make a big change. So personally, myself, I looked at, I think, my own journey, if you really take a look at it, right? So I've been an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, made a bunch of investments, and when you started making some money, you start giving back to some NGOs. What we realized is that when you give money, there's always this notion that, where is that money going? I'm not sure, is it used for the right purpose and things like that. And then the NGO also has this challenge of accountability, and are they putting the money to right use? So it's a yin and yang problem when it comes to that. So I ran into this organization called, I think it's a movement called Effective Altruism, and these organizations, they want to look under the hood and really understand where the impact is. I was telling you earlier, malaria, for example, right? People thought it's a problem that need to get solved all around the world, especially in the underprivileged nations where malaria is prevalent, right? So one way is to do, the intervention. You can do multiple things. You can spray, you can, try to, invent a medication for it or some other kind of intervention. All of them require a significant amount of investment, but the simplest solution would be to provide mosquito nets to everyone, right? So this organization figured that out. So like that, they picked various major issues, and their whole notion is how to, basically doing good better. That's sort of, so that's how pulled me into this, saying that, hey, we're donating is enough. How do you look at things differently, right? So then a colleague of mine in the Silicon Valley, another charter member, his name is Kumar Ganapati, both of us said, hey, instead of writing checks, why don't we, engage with early stage entrepreneurs who are doing for-profit social enterprises, especially in India. So that's how we got started. So we've been at it for the last 12, 18 months. It's been a good journey. We are seeing lots and lots of companies, a lot of ideas. So our idea is to see how we can make an impact investment in some 4 areas where we can make a difference, right? So we looked at healthcare technology. So I talked about malaria. There's a company called Himx Health. They make a device. So you can do the malaria test within a very, very short duration. You don't need to, you can go, it's a point of care system. You can go to the remote villages and get it done. So if you do find a bunch of, malaria cases there, they can do a broader intervention. So you can do spraying or whatever else you need to do. So sometimes finding that kind of a cost, right? So we did healthcare technology, and I'll give you some more examples on EdTech, agricultural technology, and livelihood. So these are the 4 areas that we are focused on. So it's been an amazing journey, and personally, I feel it's a lot more fulfilling than trying to be another print money type of entrepreneur, right, at this stage of my career. So.
No, it's interesting because our journey and my personal journey in impact has actually, it's kind of been an accidental one, right? It started out because as we were looking to put capital to work, a lot of the investors started asking us questions around it, right? And it started with basic questions like, what are the governance systems? What kind of impact are you having on society, and what kind of impact are you having, your businesses are having in the environment? And so ESG, which kind of became the kind of basic principles around which we started looking at our businesses. And besides, underwriting financial returns, we were trying to assess that what are we really doing and what our business is doing to impact society. Mm-hmm. And that's where we started, I would say, laying the foundations of how we were looking at making investments. And then sometime in 2017, we actually got invited by the Indian and the UK governments who were looking to catalyze investments focused on climate investing. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, we had some experience investing in renewables, but that was pretty much, the extent of our experience. So as we started peeling the layers and looking beyond, what is possible, and we realize that the opportunity is so significant. In fact, it's been estimated that a country like India needs in excess of $2.5 trillion just by 2030 if we were to really meet the national and the global goals which have been set, right, to bring the world to a level where we don't increase our overall temperatures by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, right? So the 1.5 degrees Celsius has become absolutely a key benchmark for the world and for most nations to kind of try and get to, right? And so it's in some ways that actually led us into the world of impact investing, and climate investing for us today is become very core and central. And you talk very interestingly about the way you look for problems and the way you look for very interesting entrepreneurs to solve those problems at the grassroots level.
Yeah.
It's no different even in our business, right?
Yeah.
It's just that the approaches that
the
you are
scales are
adopting
different, exactly,
and the approach that we are adopting is different. Maybe we should talk a little bit about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, see, for us, if you really take a look at it, right, the stage is like, when you're really young, right, when you graduate from college or even while you're a student, you want to go make a difference in the world. So a lot of these young kids, I would call them these days, they want to come and, do something for the world, right? So this could be an area. So when we look at that pattern, so we work with them early on, but we also wanted to sort of, all entrepreneurs go through their high and the lows, right? So we don't want to be like, two guys with an idea with a PowerPoint, write check or engage with them, right? So what we tell them is, hey, go on your own, figure out, maybe take this personal risk yourself, but try to do it in such a way that you're building a for-profit business that are impact oriented. So make sure that your mission is clearly captured and you're not wavering on the mission, during your up and down. So we just look for those entrepreneurs who have gone through that one cycle of up and down, and then make sure that it is impact. You're not compromising the impact at all. And we want to be able to understand the metric and match it with our own metrics, right? We want to make sure that it is either, women empowerment, it could be, livelihood, it could be cleanliness, it could be education, and therefore some waterfall effect. Like, we'll talk about a company called Centa that we worked with, which is for teacher, improvement, right? It's basically, they almost give a credit score for the teacher so that the teacher then governments can give them raise, or they can give awards, or they can get better jobs and things like that. So it's a very good entrepreneur called Ramya, who was a McKinsey partner for education practice in the US. So she went and got started, right? So it's really, ultimately what we are looking for is that, is there an impact as the entrepreneur gone through their high and low? And also, we can be the true mentor capital provider, because when we write a check, it's not going to be a lot of money, but it's going to be that money that takes them and sets them up for a large Series A or something like that. So that's the kind of the journey that we are capturing. As you can see, it is not like two guys on the PowerPoint, but it's also not a lot of money, right? So we are looking at anywhere between, to a maximum of $500,000 per company, but in multiple tranches. That's what we are looking at. But I'm pretty sure your scale is a lot different considering the number of zeros you have, Yeah.
That is true. And in fact, I think where we are slightly different in our approach is that first and foremost, I think there is a time for every business. There can be businesses which are too early, businesses maybe which are a bit late. And I do think that in deciding in a particular opportunity, for us, what is most important, that is this the right time? Has the time for that business come? Is it at an inflection point where over the next 3 to 5, maybe 7 years, are you going to see some very rapid growth? And what are those ingredients, right? The first ingredient we really look for, at least if I look at just from a climate investing perspective, and I think it's pretty similar when we're looking at doing healthcare or livelihood or any of those areas, is the problem at a level where today the unit economics of your solution are such that there is a ready market opportunity out there, right? I think most people struggle to try and determine that. I think there are two very key drivers for that, right? One is that how do you get technology and innovation to drive those unit economics, and two, how rapidly can you scale right? Which then brings in the efficiencies and the economies which scale normally brings into those things in. And we look for those two elements, and that's where it becomes kind of, I would say, the first layer, right? Where we say, okay, let's go and evaluate now this further. The second is very clearly that you do need a very supportive ecosystem, right? If you're looking at what's happening today, and I think in many ways corporates are now taking a leadership, right, when it comes to impact. They're looking at what they are today in terms of the footprint they're leaving on various things that they're doing, right? And what do they need to do in order to become better? So in many ways, corporates are driving this change, and corporates are actually creating the market for many entrepreneurs on the impact investing side, right? Saying that, okay, we are willing to be the first adopters, take on your services as long as it's reasonable and it's commercially viable, and we are willing to provide you that first lever of growth for you to be able to go out and build that business out there. The third is what we are seeing is that the government regulatory systems, especially what we are seeing over the last 5 years in India, is there is a massive surge of, I would say, national and subnational activity at the government level, right? To basically see what can we do to create, right? I think there was certain kind of, initiatives taken like the CSR programs, a lot of regulatory changes around climate change, a lot of, support. If you look at the whole Jan Dhan program, the digitization, the mobile phone, the payments, it's just been an incredible, I would say, environment in which today, if you add up all of these things, there is significant opportunities to create very valuable businesses which have a very strong impact on society.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about payment, right? So, I mean, I'm coming to India due to pandemic for a couple of years. So I was just meeting with my family member. When you go to the local, vegetable vendor off the market or whatever, I was surprised to see that when you give the cash to them, no, please pay me in WhatsApp, Google Pay or whatever. It's a phenomenal transformation when it comes to payment. That basically changes the whole economy, right? How that, the whole behavior changes for people. It's phenomenal from what I heard. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a little bit also, right, on at your scale, when you're making these investments. I noticed in looking at your website last night. So you were doing in the electric vehicle transformation that the country is going through. At those scales, what are the kind of metrics that you're looking for, and where do you engage with the entrepreneur or the companies? Are you looking at late stage investments? Are you looking at in public markets you invest? How do you? I mean, it's such a large fund you have.
So if you think about climate, other than renewables, where India has seen significant, I would say, capital as well as growth in, we have over 100 gigawatts of renewable energy today that we have set up capacities for in India. The other areas on energy transition, especially electric mobility, is very, very nascent. And for us, when we started looking at mobility, we started looking at where do the unit economics really stack up, right? And we started looking at personal transportation. We looked at public transportation, and in public, where we saw that there was a very clear gap was on
the buses.
And especially in intercity buses, not as much in intracity. And we said, look, what can we do out here to just almost bring in a kind of if I would say the airline analogy, right? With what happened with privatization of the airline industry in India, that you saw a massive surge. And not only with that, but also created a great environment in which people could travel there. And so we kind of seeing that same opportunity on the bus transportation side, with India investing so much in the road infrastructure, the whole, e-toll programs which are all kicking in and creating all the capital required to support and sustain the infrastructure build out.
Right.
Two is very clearly the government's program, which they've launched something called FAME2, Faster Adoption of Electric Vehicles, which is supporting electrification of the transportation industry. Three is a very vibrant ecosystem of local manufacturers now coming in. And with the PLI schemes, etc., which have been launched by the government, local OEMs now building electric vehicles. And four is a demand, right? Where people, if you look at beyond the railway networks, there are huge blind spots in the Indian economy where people need to travel and get to point A to point B. And the only real viable form of transportation is using a bus. And so we looked at all of this and said, look, we could potentially be that first fully electric mobility business in the bus system in India. And that's what we did. We just launched the company. We set it up. We got a great team on board who are literally, in my view, the founders of the business, even though we brought them on board. And we've provided capital at scale where we could immediately, drive economics by placing orders on hundreds of buses, right? And that's what I meant by economies of scale.
So when you say hundreds of buses, do you think the private bus operators place the order with you? Or
so they partner with us. So it's a completely tech-enabled, the tech stacks we've created, it's all a tech-enabled ecosystem where we partner with local operators. We provide the vehicles, we provide the technology.
So including a full vehicle, it's not just powertrain.
Absolutely.
So basically, it's like
it's an end-to-end
Boeing
thing.
outfitted with all the seats.
That's right. As someone was telling me, is it a wet lease? I said, don't get into definitions. Just look at what we're trying to do. It's changing the way people are going to basically travel.
So where do you start? I mean, are you starting in big metros? Are you going from...
the government has created a program where they're actually helping state and cities convert their transportation into electric. So we're working with those governments and where we are actually offering our buses on a long-term concession, right? Where we get paid per kilometer and we basically operate these buses for them.
Wow.
So that gives us revenue visibility and it allows...
some predictability also.
It allows, without spending CapEx, it allows these utilities to convert their vehicles into electric. And for us, that becomes a base layer on which we're building out a whole B2C business, right? Taking it directly to consumers and basically making a consumer offering over there.
So again, I mean, I have some interest in my own for-profit business that I'm running called Multi-Core, where mobility is, again, depending on which way you look at it, right? On one side, it's on the electrification and the other side is on automation and safety and all that. So when you're talking about these buses, do you do the integration or do you, meaning that you work with some bus manufacturers and you outsource the bus manufacturing to them? Oh, that's what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think technology is get to a point where we want to be the users of the best technology rather than creating that ourselves, right? But applying it to the use case situation and making sure that ultimately consumer benefits from that, right? The whole customer journey, can we digitize it fully, right? And other than the ride itself, everything else is basically a digital experience for the consumer. The bus itself today, because it's electrics, right, you can capture so much data on the vehicle, on the battery, on the user experience, etc. So we want to make sure that we use that data. And today, that, as we all know, is really the kind of key to kind of figuring out how do you keep improving and delivering better service to consumers. So it's kind of early days, and therefore we could not find an opportunity to invest in. So we said, let's go build one. And so that's the whole build model we are applying in our investment strategy. But I do think that this is something that we're seeing beyond, right, just what we as an investor are doing. We are seeing a lot of corporations and a lot of entrepreneurs doing the same thing. And it brings me to this point of what, I read a very interesting book by Mr. N. Chandra. It's called Digital Nation. And I would definitely recommend people kind of, if they do have the time to read that book, because it really talks about how the Tata's experiences in using digital to address last mile healthcare delivery, right, could be leveraged to such an extent that you ultimately end up optimizing the healthcare software, which is there, right? The medical, practice, etc., and using technology, deliver that at a very, very, very low cost.
Yeah, I mean, today, the onus is on the consumer to maintain their records, right? If there is a way to digitize the whole thing and the content is available to them, do point of care devices. I talked about Himx Health, right? So they are a company, started by two researchers who are, white American people, back in US, but they felt that they needed to do something. The reason I'm saying that is that sometimes, people from around the world are trying to solve the problems of where the problem is, right? So, I remember a professor from MIT, Ramesh Raskar, will always say that, right? There are a lot of top talent looking for a problem. There are problems looking for researchers. You have to connect them, right? So in this particular case, Patty, reached out to Thai. She came through our Thai Angels program. And we, enable them. And today, many charter members, who are, Arun Kumar, from KPMG, his wife, Purnima is their India operations head. So they have done a very good job of going to entire supply chain they're building in India, right? So, there's a razor blade model, right? So they have this point of care system that goes to all the various locations, remote parts where you have malaria and sickle cell. So you can go and get this test done for a very, very small amount of money and time. And you don't need a sophisticated healthcare professional to go and get these tests done, right? So it's a very, very user-friendly device. And amazing thing is the data. So they collect, so that they can get a complete sense of the entire, you can do small camps and collect all this data. So if you're talking about Tata, there are all these conglomerates, they want to do good for the regions, right? They leverage these platforms like this, and companies like Himx and through the Thai ecosystem are able to reach that end market, right? That's one classic example. I always feel that how they made a difference in two major situations, right? One is malaria and the other one is sickle cell. So that's a classic story of technology that was originally developed in Case Western, productized by two entrepreneurs, supported by Thai, delivering solutions in India and in Africa. So it's a very, very good story. As far as my own personal, I've seen their journey over the last 3-4 years. Amazing what they have to go through in terms of productization. Also, going through the regulatory and all of that stuff, right? So that's great journey. And as they scale, right, they can always, get support from these large business operations or conglomerates, and they can go to next stage, right, in terms of scale. Yeah.
AJK, how are you seeing, because I think if you see with all of these, I would say, initiatives, there's a little bit of a blurring of a line between what was philanthropic capital and what is impact capital, or in other terms, people also use the term socially responsible capital, right? And in your mind, as you look at all of these, opportunities and you look at what's happening, how would you want to define, right? Is there a very clear role for philanthropy, which is completely separate from impact capital? And what in your mind would be the key kind of guiding rails?
So the way I look at, you talked about the CSR law, right? That has created a lot more capital here. So those kind of institutions can figure out a way to further research, right? Classic example is I met with, at Thai Boston on last Friday. There was an entrepreneur from MIT. She, of Indian origin, but born and brought up in America. She had developed a way to effectively share ventilator across 2 beds, right? So when the ventilators are and a lot of lives got affected, and people were doing in a brute force way of sharing the ventilators, and that causes problem. Both people can get killed, right, if you don't do it right, because then how you modulate all of that stuff is different from patient to patient. So they invented a technology, but again, this is purely based on quote unquote NIH funded research or other type of government funded research. Perhaps even CSR or some foundations have given money to them. So what they did is they created it as a non-profit, but the product that they are making, they made it available for licensing. Other people perhaps can manufacture or something like that, right? So it's a good way of, that is a good application of CSR in my mind. But what you don't want to do is to, give money so that the beneficiary organization like an NGO or whatever, and then their associate beneficiaries are always collecting money. They're not sustaining themselves. So I believe in any organization, at some point in time, they should even, sometimes free is taken lightly, right? So that's what happens if you just start giving money and donating as opposed to getting them sustainable in a way that they should generate some revenue. The beneficiary should see some value in the services that is being offered at the right nominal price. So when you do that, then it can be a scalable business. So personally myself, I migrated, as I told earlier, from being a donor to an investor in for-profit social enterprises, so that the impact metrics, once understood and it resonates with our investment partnership and the entrepreneur, and that meeting of the mind is there, that's when we proceed. I mean, and that's where I've come to that transition. And by the way, that at various scales, right? There are funds. I mean, there are billion-dollar funds who are focused on impact investment. There are, few $1 million type of funds, right? And everywhere in between, they're all looking for some kind of impact metrics, and that resonance is what going to make it happen. The entrepreneur, in my opinion, should never drift. Right, from that mission. The mission drift happens. In fact, I think in our partnership, we even make that as a mandate. If they, I'm not saying it's we'll pull out of it with some penalty or whatever, right? So they sign up, the entrepreneur signing up for that mission, no matter what.
I think that's a great point. But one thing that I think, which I take leave of what you do at the individual level, and I think corporates can actually try and imbibe that, is that if you look at the corporate structures today, the CSR teams are very different from their own venture capital or acceleration teams that they have, right? Because corporates are big into looking at where they can invest to potentially look at the next disruptive idea or strategy or technology or brand or whatever it is. But if they somehow blend the two and create a blended finance model, I think there is a huge opportunity for corporates being potentially some of the largest impact investors today.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
It does kind of leverage both angles, as you said rightly, right? Are you generating something which is positive from a financial returns perspective and also positive from an impact returns perspective? Excellent.
And are there some examples of, you've been on the ground in India, have you seen some very good examples of corporates actually leveraging some of this journey of an entrepreneur and helping them to scale?
So it's early days, but we are seeing that. We are seeing organizations like Microsoft and Siemens and others really looking at seeing what they can do to blend the two together. And obviously, there is a very clear commercial driver to it.
Yeah.
But they understand that that is capital being deployed to create eventually a much broader positive impact on society or the environment. So those two, I would say, is wedded and kind of woven into their overall strategy of what they're doing. So the people who are part, it's a kind of a multidisciplinary teams who are actually working together to evaluate that. In fact, globally also what we're seeing is now there's an alliance of asset managers who have actually come together, some of the top 50 asset managers globally, maybe managing $6-7 trillion of capital.
Yeah.
And they're saying, look, that we've got a very clear strategy that, X% of our capital under management has to be climate positive, for example, by 2025.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
So these are, I would say, some big tailwinds which are there, which are going to be, in my mind, unleash a new wave of entrepreneurship, globally. So I'm pretty excited about it.
No, what we have noticed, right, and in looking at multiple segments, as I talked about, ed tech, agricultural technology, healthcare technology, and livelihood. One thing that we've noticed is waste management, right? It's a huge thing. So there's
circular
a company called Hasiru Dala in Bangalore that we were looking at them, and so they are changing everything, right from rack pickers or waste pickers, and then all the way to recycling. So they're just giving the baton to somebody else, and there is a recycler who will take that and then put that thing to use. So what do you think is that growing? I know you talked a little bit about this whole waste management. To me, it is a big problem. For us to get a clean India, that's a very important impact, that we all need to see as consumers, as corporate citizens, as government, all over, right? So how do you think, or what are the major sort of trend line on that topic?
Look, I think the first part to solving a problem is recognizing there's a problem. I think we are at that stage in India right now, that we've all recognized that waste is a huge problem, whatever kind. It may be paper, metals, plastics, cloth, for example. Fast fashion generates a lot of waste. And even areas such as electronics, right, with a massive challenge. And as we get into, for example, electrification of transportation, right, over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to have batteries, right? How do you create second life for batteries? Because batteries are going to, stop working, and you've got to figure out a way to recycle or manage that, waste. So I do think that both the citizens and the government today of the country have recognized that waste is a big issue. I think the challenge is that no one, I would say it's yet quite complicated, and no one is today, I would say, in a position to say, what can I do about it, right? And I would say one of the most simplest things of dealing with it is first look at yourself as a generator of waste.
Absolutely.
And figure out what do you need to do to reduce the amount of waste you generate, and two, figure a way to reuse and recycle that, right? So I do think it starts with each one of us. But having said that, there's again this beauty that we are seeing many new business models coming up in the waste industry. We ourselves are investing very actively. We've made a few investments, and we do believe that it's a combination of using technology and the right kind of, there's lots involved, logistics, the way you actually dispose it, the way you recycle it,
or maybe
all of that stuff.
Produce energy too from that.
So one of the big things we're doing is actually creating energy from organic waste.
Exactly.
Very
good opportunity.
Renewable natural gas, as we think, it takes away a lot of methane, which otherwise gets released into the air, which is 8 times more harmful than carbon dioxide, and it actually builds it as a low carbon source of energy.
I mean, so in our journey, right, when we are working with all these for-profit social enterprises, as we are exploring the impact investments, one thing that we are noticing is the educational institutions here in India, right, IITs and other IIITs and all of them, they're also giving a lot of oomph in terms of giving these engineering minds to look at these problems very, very well. Combined with some good investments from the government, where the governments are, giving grants, like, in the US, you may be familiar with it. There's a lot of small business innovation research grants. They give technology transfer research funding between the universities and industries. So if we do more of that, and then combine with accelerators, incubators, as well as early stage venture capitalists, you can create a much broader ecosystem of, starting pure research, to launching it at scale. That's sort of the journey I envision, that our country can make. But to your point, what can we all do? I mean, you talked about responsible investing, right? I mean, you could even, whether you're, putting, 1,000 rupees or lakhs of rupees or crores of rupees into work for you through other mutual funds and others, make sure that those fund managers are looking at, are they seeing sustainability as an important thing as they evaluate their companies to put their money to work, right? Which is our money to work. So to me, that's one responsible thing all of us can do, asking for it, right? I mean, it's myself and my wife, that's what we look at in India, in US right now. Say, where do we put our money to work? Can we do in these areas, right? So that, even regions, right? So they're saying that, hey, if you need to, in India, if the broader impact is there, ultimately the money can come here. As you said, it's multiple $1 trillion being managed right now. How can we come to the end user, right? Coming to another point is the awareness. You said that, hey, it starts from within.
So if I might just, before you get to that, right, I think the point to make, and I think the point I want to send out to the world, is that today, for the next few decades, sustainability is going to be, I would say, one of the biggest game changers globally. Two is the capital and capital market providers, right? Money which is out there, all wants to put money to work over here. So there is a huge amount of capital which is available if entrepreneurs can actually create the right business ideas and right business models, right? And therefore, I do believe that, like what we've seen in other sectors previously, if one does start focusing on building sustainability businesses, addressing whether it be circular economy issues, or any of the livelihood, climate, society issues, right, you are going to see significant, draw of capital. And finally, the capital markets are actually not just negatively valuing businesses which are negatively impacting, but also giving much more value to businesses which are creating the right kind of positive impact. So there is a very clear economic incentive now to drive sustainability agendas.
No, I completely agree with you. And I think all of us can do our own part, right? First start, like you earlier said, we have to start from within, start from your own home. then the people around you, then maybe in your neighborhood, whatever. I call it, there is a circle of influence at every one of our levels, and you just need to make sure that you influence that in doing this good better, right? That's what I would say. But from a opportunities to make that impact investment or impact in general, you could apply your mind, you could volunteer, you could invest. All of is a possibility, right? So, what's your sort of words of wisdom for I think we are also almost running out of time in terms of the India or world at large, right? What they should do differently when from within or on an individual basis.
Look, I think each one has to have their own kind of personal cause who they feel aligned to, right? And I think you could pick and choose any one of these and start by just basically saying you do it yourself, right? And as you do it yourself, then how do you basically build awareness for what your experiences have been? And therefore, how do you share it? And then finally, once you share it, then do you want to do something more about it, right?
Yeah.
Becoming that change agent rather than basically just being
Following.
right? The change, the follower, right? And I do think in some ways all of us have kind of got to figure that out. But I would say anything better, like they say, right? When you start running, right? Anything is better than sitting on the couch. Just get up and start.
Take the first step.
As
they say, take the first step. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think I think we are coming to an end. I think it's a great conversation. It's wonderful to see we are coming from the quote unquote entrepreneurial Silicon Valley mindset, and it's amazing to see large funds like you trying to make tremendous impact. I think there's going to be a big meeting of minds as we try to create more companies at our stage, and then you absorbing them and scaling it further.
Absolutely, pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you all.
Nice meeting you guys.